Oh, it is.
Hi, Giselle. Can you hear me?
We will start the meeting shortly. Okay.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you okay. We'll start the meeting shortly and they will call your name once we go over the presentation, okay?
I think I had my volume now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you okay.
Good, thank you. Okay. I'm here with the owner, Willie Barrios, and his associate.
Willie, thank you. We will start the meeting shortly, and then once the commissioners call your name, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, okay?
Got it, no problem.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It looks like everybody's here for the meeting. Before we begin the meeting, I want to remind everybody to keep your microphones muted if you're not speaking, because any sound in your area will be picked up and be part of the recording and affect the displays. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to the January 19th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Please note that this meeting is being attended by the Planning Commission and applicants via teleconference. We thank you for your patience as we navigate city business through this new meeting process. For the benefit of the public and as required by the Brown Act, all voting will be by roll call. Planning Secretary Camel, can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Uva?
Present.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ortiz?
Present.
Commissioner Montoya?
Present.
Vice Chair Owens?
Present.
And Chair Duarte?
Present. Okay, moving along. Now's the time to, if the commissioners have any announcements, requests for future agenda items and conference meeting reports. Vice Chair Owens?
I have none, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Montoya?
Nothing to report, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Uva?
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Nothing for me either.
Okay, and I have none. Okay, going on to presentations. Will the does the community development director, deputy city manager Schindler, are there any presentations tonight?
No presentations tonight, Chair Duarte.
Okay, great. Deputy Chair Manager Schindler, are there any city council actions to report on?
No council actions to report tonight, Chair Duarte.
Okay, moving along. Going on to the first public hearing. The public hearing for application PLN-21-00111 located at 10225 Lorena Avenue is now open. Does the secretary have proof of publication?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Deputy City Manager Schindler, can you introduce the staff person presenting this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair Duarte. Tonight we have our Assistant Planner, Giselle Enriquez, to provide the presentation.
May I interrupt for 1 second?
Yes, Commissioner Uva.
I need to abstain from this item as I own rental property at 10232 Western, which is 500 feet from the subject property. So I am going to mute myself and stop the video, okay?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
Okay, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. The item before you today is PLN 21-00111. It is a request to construct a 3-unit multifamily development on property zone R3, which is a multifamily residential located at 10225 La Reina Avenue. This item was presented to Planning Commission on December 15. During this meeting, the Planning Commission decided to continue the item to allow the applicant to consider the installation of the conduit for future EV charging stations and photovoltaic panels. Staff discussed this with the applicant, who has agreed to adding a new condition. And that condition will be number 20 in the resolution, which you will be able to find on page 13 of the Planning Commission agenda. Oops. And so, as a refresher, I wanted to go over the project. It will consist of a 3-unit development with 2 separate buildings. The building at the front will consist of 2 bedrooms with their own 2-car garage. And the building at the rear will consist of 1 unit and its own 2-car garage. As you can see on this elevation, it will maintain the Spanish architectural style with elements such as smooth stucco, tile roof, iron window, and pop-ups that add dimension to the facade of the building. And this concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Enriquez. Commissioner Ortiz, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Montoya?
No questions and nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Vice Chair Owens?
I have no questions either. Thank you for the presentation.
Yes, and I have no questions. Just want to be statement. Looks like very nice. So congrats to staff there. Before we move on, the public hearing, before we begin the public hearing, I'd like to remind members of the public participating telephonically that the city meetings rules contained in the Downey Municipal Code prohibit any conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting, even if you're participating telephonically. Each speaker should have 3 minutes to address the commission. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission regarding the public hearing for item PLN-21-00111 only may now call our teleconference line at 562-299-6622. For those who submitted comments via email, your comments will be read into the record and no further public comment via teleconference will be permitted. I will now open the public hearing, and we'll start by inviting the applicant to address the commission. Before I call the applicant or his or her representatives, this would be any time for any planning commissioners to discuss any pre-hearing visits or pre-hearing discussions that the commissioners may have had about the project. Vice Chair Owens?
I have none, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Commissioner Montoya?
I've had no visits or discussions, Mr. Chairman.
And Commissioner Ortiz?
I have none either, Chair. Thank you.
And I have none. Will the applicant please make yourself available here and let us know about the project and anything you want us to let us know?
Yes, we're here. The applicant, his name is Willie. He's here with us. His English is limited unless he's no, his English is limited. So I'm the engineer, and this is the owner along with his associate. We were at the meeting. I was at the meeting last year, December. However, he couldn't make it. He couldn't assist. We were made aware of this item number 20 that's going to get added to the project, which he doesn't have any issues, or in complete agreement with this being done. Is that the play? She says it, yeah. So, yeah, unless you guys have any other items or anything that information that you would need from us regarding the project, Giselle presented, everything that's being done very thoroughly. But yeah, we're in complete agreement with the new request that's being added or requested for the future EV charging stations and the solar panels.
Okay, great. Commissioner Ortiz, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No questions, just a comment. Great project. I really like how it's looking. So good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Montoya?
No questions. And, I share the same sentiments as Commissioner Ortiz. It looks great. So congratulations.
Vice Chair Owens?
Same, very nice looking project. Is going to really pick up, that piece of that location and clean it up nicely. And thank you for considering the request for the photovoltaic and for the charging station, future accommodations.
Yes, I think you've heard my comments about it too. Looks like just very, very beautiful building. So I'm excited this is coming to Downey. Okay, great. Now turning into Secretary Kavanaugh, may I have the first speaker on the phone?
There are no calls for public comment, Chair.
Okay, Secretary Allen, do we have any written public comment on the item to be read into the record?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Okay. We have an email from Dylan Casey requesting the email be read from the California Renters Legal Advocacy and Education Fund regarding the proposal to approve 10225 Lorena Avenue development. Dear Downey Planning Commission and City Attorney, the California Renters Legal Advocacy and Education Fund, CARLA, submits this letter to inform the Downey Planning Commission that they have an obligation to abide by all relevant state housing laws when evaluating the 10225 Lorena Avenue development. The Housing Accountability Act requires approval of zoning and general plan compliant projects, such as this one, unless findings can be made regarding specific objective written health and safety hazards. As you are well aware, California remains in the throes of a statewide crisis level housing shortage. New housing such as this is a public benefit. It will increase tax revenue, new customers to local businesses, decarbonization in the face of the climate crisis, but most importantly, it will reduce the displacement of existing residents into homeless or carbon-heavy car commutes. The laws cited in this letter are designed to allow and require cities to approve of new homes over the objection of a small minority of neighbors. Research indicates that the anti-housing voices frequent in public hearings are disproportionately white, higher income, and homeowners. These voices do not represent the best interests of Downey or the broader community. Approving developments like this one over these vocal objections is a step forwards towards racial, economic, environmental, and social justice. We urge Downey to approve this development because it is the right decision for the city and it is required by state law. CARLA is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation whose mission includes advocating for increased access to housing for Californians at all income levels, including low-income households. The proposed development consistent with the policies and goals expressed in the Downey's general plan will provide additional badly needed housing and encourage infill developments and recycling of land to provide the community with sufficient residential sites. The 10225 Lorena Avenue development will also improve community appearance by monotony or dissimilarity in new construction. While no one project will solve the regional housing crisis, the proposed 10225 Lorena Avenue development is the kind of housing Downey needs to mitigate displacement, provide shelter for. That's the end of the email.
Okay, Thank you, Secretary Kavanaugh. We'll now close the public hearing and we can begin deliberation. Commissioners, Commissioner Ortiz, what are your thoughts?
I think we all share the same sentiment. I think it's a great project to have in the city of Downey, and I'm ready to approve this.
Okay. Commissioner Montoya?
I think we're ready to, pull a vote.
Okay. And was there a motion and a second?
I'll make that motion.
Anybody get a second?
Oh, second.
Let's be clear about the motion. That's to approve PLN 21-00111, approving the a request for site plan review.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Second.
all right, great.
I apologize. Is that Vice Chair Owens seconding?
Yeah,
That was me, yes.
Okay, great. Okay, and the motion passes to approve PLN 21-00111 site plan review. By
Mary,
a
I think
vote.
you have to do a roll call.
yeah, can you do a roll call vote, Mayor?
Oh, I apologize. Commissioner Uva abstains. Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Commissioner Montoya?
Yes.
Vice Chair Owens?
Yes.
And Chair Duarte?
Yes.
And the motion passes to approve PLN 21-00111 for a site plan review with 4 in favor and 1 abstention.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me, I apologize. We don't have to stay for the remaining of the meeting, correct? We're okay to go? Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, moving on to the public hearing for general plan amendment, PLN-21-00139 is now open. Does the secretary have proof of publication?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Deputy City Manager Schindler, can you introduce the staff person presenting this item?
I think Commissioner Uva has a report regarding our participation on this one.
Yes. Yes, I do. Out in an abundance of caution and on the advice of our city attorney, I will abstain from public hearing number 2 on the agenda as I
Harry, we didn't hear, we didn't hear the full report out.
abstain again.
Carrie, we didn't hear your report out.
I'm sorry, you didn't hear a word of what I said?
Right where you got to the meat of it.
No,
The
that's fine.
reason why you're gonna abstain. Could you repeat it?
Okay, so I would need to abstain just out in abundance of own.
Yeah, Carrie, the connection's not very good. So I'll go ahead and report it out for you. So on
Okay.
And then you can go ahead and mute and turn the video off. On behalf of Commissioner Uva, I'm gonna report
Got
out
it.
the third conflict. Out of an abundance of caution and on the advice of the city attorney, Commissioner Uva will abstain from public hearing item number 2 on the agenda as she owns rental property located at 10232 Western Avenue, which will be affected by the proposed general plan housing element amendment. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Deputy City Manager Schindler, can you introduce the staff person presenting this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair Duarte. This is a continuation of the presentation that we previously provided you on this topic, our housing element update. And the prior presentation was provided by Diana Gonzalez of MIG, our subject matter consulting group that assisted with the creation of this housing element. And tonight, Diana Gonzalez is back again to provide the presentation. And if there's any questions specific to our municipal code or zoning code, Crystal Landabazo, our city planner, can assist as well. With that, Diana, we turn the presentation over to you.
Can you see my screen there, my full screen? Okay. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for having me back here tonight for this adoption hearing. About a month ago, I was able to present to you most of this information. So tonight I'll try to be brief and focus on the key parts of the process, the content of the document, review things like the RENA, the housing plan, and what the next steps in this process are. As a quick review, the housing element is part of the city's general plan and lays out housing goals, policies, and programs to guide housing related actions in the city. It's a unique element in that it must be reviewed and approved for compliance by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, which we refer to as HCD. The cycle we're in is a 6th cycle, and it covers the time period from 2021 to 2029. The element must be updated every 8 years. And for this cycle we're in, the adoption deadline was October 15th. But jurisdictions have 120 days to adopt. Because of the complexity of this cycle, many cities in the region are taking that extra time. The 6th cycle housing element update is different than previous updates for a few key reasons. First, there was a lot of new laws that were passed that added new and more stringent requirements to the document. And it's also given HCD more oversight over the process and over compliance issues. The RENA for this cycle, which we'll review in a few slides, is also significantly higher. Updating an element requires public participation, and that's been challenging because of the limitations from the pandemic. The housing element has 5 main components, and they all feed into the housing plan. The different parts of the element are used to establish existing or baseline conditions and include information such as population, housing characteristics, constraints to housing development, land resources available to meet the city's need, and an evaluation of how well the city implemented the previous housing element. Again, all these components build toward the housing plan, which includes the city's housing goals, policies, and implementing programs. A key part of the update is community participation. And for this housing element update, that's included 2 workshops, a community survey, and a web page for the housing element update. To ensure that residents in the wider Downey community were included, notices were posted on the city's social media accounts in English and Spanish. We wanted to make sure we reached the low and moderate income community and special needs residents. So the city put together a list of agencies and organizations that serve these communities in Downey and in the surrounding areas. Both workshops were accessible to the Spanish-speaking community. The workshops were virtual, but they had dedicated rooms where the presentation and the discussion was conducted in Spanish. And the community also had the option to complete the community survey in Spanish. Key themes that emerged from the outreach included, well, overwhelmingly, it was the need for more affordable multifamily housing, the concern that housing policies should consider Downey residents first, especially vulnerable residents. There was support for revisiting the city zoning code, the land use planning policies, potentially having less restrictive development standards. There was also support for different types of housing, such as accessory dwelling units and even tiny house development. Several key themes related to climate change, parking, safety, and traffic concerns were also repeatedly brought up in the outreach process. Another key part of the housing element is showing where the city can accommodate future housing by accommodating the regional housing needs assessment, which we refer to as the RENA. This is what the state deems as the city's fair share of housing to be developed during the planning period. Now, the determination of fair share starts with the state calculating how much new housing is needed and assigning a number to the different regions of the state. We're in the Southern California Association of Governments, SCAG, and they were assigned a RHNA of a little over 1.3 million units. Now, SCAG gets to develop its methodology and distributes those units to all the cities and the counties in the region. Downey received a RHNA of 6,525 units and has to show that there is enough land zoned for housing to accommodate this allocation. The city did appeal this assignment, and also I think staff had mentioned that they had participated in, not sure if it's a lawsuit or of an appeal on a regional basis as well. Now, as you can see, the RHNA is 5 times larger than the last planning period, and is going to be a challenge because, in the last planning period, there were less than 500 units built. Demand for housing in Downey and all of Southern California in general has significantly increased over the past decade due to slow housing production. And while the cities work to encourage housing development, it is constrained, as are other cities, by lack of undeveloped land, high land prices, high construction costs, and the high cost of subsidized affordable housing. The RHNA is also broken down into different affordability categories because the state wants the city to plan for housing for different income levels. So when we talk about the RHNA, we have to look at affordability. But because we can't predict what type of housing or what that cost of that housing will be, there's a state law that allows us to use density as a way to make that determination. So in Downey and in most cities in LA County, if a property allows development of housing at a density of 30 units per acre or higher, the city can take credit for the lower income RHNA categories. Of course, there are other factors such as size, existing uses, things to take into consideration, but density is the most important. Now, the first step in meeting the RHNA is to look at housing that is expected to be built in the planning period, and that includes approved or proposed projects. It also looks at ADU estimates, so we can estimate based on the city's track record and changes in the law how many ADUs will be developed in the planning period. Next, we get to look at sites that have zoning in place, which means that there's no changes to the land use that has to happen for those to be used. In Downey, we looked at vacant and underutilized properties in the R1 and R2 zones. We looked at the downtown Downey specific plan, and we were able to use the capacity in the newly approved Rancho Los Amigos South Campus specific plan. So based on this strategy, which is step 1, we were able to identify just under 3,000 units, which means that we're still short about 3,500 units in meeting the RHNA. Now, this is commonplace in fully developed cities like Downey, where these really high RHNAs are hard to meet because the city is, again, fully developed, and opportunities for vacant land are minimal. So to address those 3,500 units that we still need to identify, this can be done by looking at sites that could be made available for housing if there were changes to the city's land use policy. So after looking at the potential to add housing capacity, we came up with a strategy that focuses on higher density and mixed use areas, and in commercial areas where residential potential can be added along commercial corridors and on commercial centers. Now, this strategy would be implemented after the adoption of the housing element through an update to the general plan and zoning ordinance. And we'll review each part of the strategy in the next few slides. Before we start that, not only was the strategy put together to meet the RHNA, but we also looked at other goals that could be accomplished. And in this case, it also helps the cities address land use policy issues and inconsistencies. It encourages transit-oriented development. And by implementing these changes as part of a general plan and zoning update, it allows a change in land use policy to occur in a more comprehensive and holistic manner. The first part of the strategy is looking at areas designated for higher density development, such as the city's medium density residential or R3 zoned areas. The strategy proposes increasing the maximum allowed density from 24 units per acre to 40 units per acre. Now, this would provide an incentive for redevelopment of properties that may be underdeveloped. For example, if there's a property that would allow multifamily housing, but is currently developed with one single family unit, this would incentivize a redevelopment of that property. This change would apply to all properties that have a general plan designation of medium density residential and an R3 zoning. Now, just to reiterate that while the change applies to all these properties, the way housing element law is written, we have to identify specific properties that we think will redevelop. That doesn't mean this is the only place that housing can be built, but this is just our way of showing the state where the capacity could potentially go. The next step is to incentivize development in the areas of the city designated for mixed use. The current mixed use general plan designation allows a density of up to 24 units per acre, but the city's never adopted an implementing zone for this designation. So this strategy proposes updating the general plan and adopting a new mixed use zone with a higher density. Currently, it allows up to 24 units an acre in density. The strategy proposes a minimum density of 30 units per acre for housing and would apply to all mixed use properties. This change would allow property owner, it gives them flexibility. It allows a property owner to build commercial uses. They can build standalone housing, or they can develop a combination of both, so a mixed use development. And as you can see on this map, most of the mixed use sites are at the southern end of the city along Lakewood Boulevard, north of the, south of the Interstate 105, above and below that. Again, the current uses that are developed now are still allowed and will be able to continue, but the change would just make it easier to develop residential and mixed use developments as was originally envisioned in these areas. The last step of the strategy is to add a housing or residential overlay zone to commercial corridors and commercial centers. The overlay zone would apply to all non-industrial and non-R1 zone properties along Telegraph Road, Firestone Boulevard, Imperial Highway, Paramount Boulevard, excuse me, and the eastern end of Florence Avenue. Again, housing element law requires us to pick specific sites to show that there's capacity, but the change would apply to all the areas you see on the map in blue. This type of overlay gives property owners and developers an incentive to develop housing if they'd like to, or to sell their property for new uses. In areas such as these, residential development is not allowed, and so an overlay would facilitate housing production by avoiding a lengthy general plan amendment or rezoning process. Overlays can also allow a mix of uses, such as adding a housing development to an underused portion of a large site, like a parking lot, or an area such as a Stonewood Center. The strategy, this doesn't assume that we would demolish the site, but it can happen if that's what the owner wants. It just assumed that there is some capacity for development on underused part of the site. Now, these changes are not drastic because currently on these corridors, you'll see a mix of commercial uses interspersed with older residential uses, some two-story older apartment buildings, for example. Or what the overlay would do is just make it easier to develop residential and mixed-use development. Again, current uses would still be able to continue. The currently allowed uses would still be continued. It's just another opportunity for property owners to be able to develop to add housing. There's also community support for this part of the strategy. In the community survey, adding housing along the city's corridors and commercial centers were the top two choices when the community was asked where new housing in Downey should go. Based on the strategy we just presented and the specific sites chosen as required by law, the city can meet the RHNA with a small surplus, which we like to have in case some of the sites don't redevelop as anticipated. Again, we're showing where we think redevelopment is likely, but at the end of the day, we can't predict exactly where development will occur. It's important to note that the RHNA is not a construction obligation. The role of the housing element is to show that the city's land use and zoning policies will allow for a certain level of development, but the city is not required to actually build these units. There's also no additional funding provided by the state to meet this RHNA, and it also doesn't approve any housing. All projects still have to go through the application review process. The next key part of the updated housing element is a housing plan. And this lays out the city's housing goals, policies, and programs, and will guide housing related actions. To update the plan, we first look at what was included in the previous housing element, and we revise or update programs based on more current information, changing needs, changing funding. We also add programs that address identified constraints or needs in the community, as well as respond to new laws. The law requires that the plan address, 5 topic areas. It has to include actions to make sure adequate land is available to meet the city's housing needs, actions to encourage development of housing, actions that address constraints on housing development, actions that help conserve and improve housing in Downey, and actions that address fair housing and ensure that all persons have equal opportunities. Under the adequate sites topic area, key programs establish how the city will meet the RHNA, which we just reviewed. And these include the rezoning that we spoke about in the MDR R3 areas, mixed use areas, and in the commercial, the overlay addition in the commercial areas. It also includes actions to provide more housing opportunities through ADU development, and it includes possibly the adoption of an inclusionary housing ordinance. Under the next goal, programs lay out action the city can take to assist in the development of housing to meet the needs of lower income and special needs households, such as the elderly and the disabled, or housing for those experiencing homelessness. Actions include giving priority to development projects that include a special needs or affordable component. Actions also include looking at what types of regulatory incentives or concessions could be offered to projects that provide housing for lower income and special needs household, and also supporting first-time home buyer and rental assistance programs. Programs addressing constraints and facilitating new development include encouraging lot consolidation on smaller parcels, addressing new laws that were passed regarding siting standards for supportive housing and emergency shelters, and also reviewing development standards periodically to make sure they facilitate and don't constrain housing development. Programs under the conservation and improvement of housing goal include code enforcement and the city's housing rebate and grant program. These are existing city programs, so the housing element identifies how the city will continue to use these programs to support housing preservation and neighborhood quality. Finally, there are programs to affirmatively further fair housing. This program is much more substantial than what was previously included because of new laws that require that the city go beyond just fair housing and instead work toward equal opportunities. This means addressing disparities in access to opportunity, including equal access to education, employment, transportation, and environmentally healthy neighborhoods. Examples of action in the element include ensuring there are procedures in place for providing equal access to city services and programs for all residents, including persons with limited proficiency in English and persons with disabilities. evaluating how amendments to the city's land use policy affects housing opportunities in different areas of the city, and prioritizing community and stakeholder engagement during controversial development decisions. Now, it's important to keep in mind that although this is the city's plan to address housing need, it is limited by several factors. For example, funding, staffing level, and jurisdiction. Some housing issues are not fully under the city's control, such as the regional homeless issue. But nevertheless, this plan is the city's effort to address housing issues for the next 8 years. It does not mean the city can't go above and beyond this if the opportunity arises. Now, the housing element update has included several phases, including public outreach and the drafting of the document, as well as a 60-day review of the first draft by the state. The draft element was first sent to the state in September, and they provided their findings from their review in November. The findings letter lays out specific additions or clarifications needed to the element in the different sections. The comments in general ask for additional analysis. Overall, the comments focused on tightening up the site's inventory, providing more information about the housing needs and resources of the city's special needs population, adding more information in the fair housing section. And for a few of the programs, the state wanted to see more specific commitment that the city will take to address housing need. Now, edits were made to the initial draft based on the findings letter. And the city posted the revised element for public comment on the city's website and sent a notice about this to a list of stakeholders. In the appendix of the element, to help the community review the housing element, we included a table that lists the state's findings along with the summary of how the findings were addressed in the element. Originally, the plan was to adopt the element after it was revised, but 2 weeks before the October due date, a new law went into effect that changed the process and the timeline. And as a result, we resubmitted the element to HCD for a second round of review. Although we could adopt and submit, HCD has indicated that most cities will go through at least 2 review cycles. The element was resubmitted in December, and the state has to give us their findings by February 18th. During the first review process, the required environmental analysis was completed. And during the remaining part of the process as we move forward, the community will still be able to provide comment and feedback. This is the end of my presentation. I know it's a complicated process, and I appreciate your time and patience, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for the presentation. Commissioner Ortiz, do you have any questions?
No questions this time. Thank you for the presentation. I know it was very thorough. Thank you.
Commissioner Montoya?
No questions either. Thank you as well for the presentation.
Vice Chair Owens?
No, I have no questions either, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez, for the presentation.
I just have 2 questions. In terms of the Rancho South Campus, in terms of meeting the housing needs, is that, are they thinking about maybe expanding the project now? Or is that something that's being talked about?
Chairman, no, that's not something that's being talked about. That specific plan was independent and factored in the number of units based on that scope of development over in that area. We wanted to weigh a lot of different factors. Number one, we wanted to assess the amount of units that we could get to satisfy as much of our RENA obligation as possible. But at the same time, we wanted to balance that with the neighboring residents in that area. You got all single family over there. And so, as we would have loved to put, 2,500 units over there, it really would have dominated that whole area. So we looked at the dwelling units per acre, density, compatibility with the surrounding area, amount of actual build out acreage that we would have at the end of the day. And that's how we got to that 700.
Yeah, great. And then the other question I just had is that I know we have a medical overlay zoning. I think you mentioned the commercial centers. There was the Stonewood. um, and the promenade area. Is there any other commercial centers here, maybe for that overlay for the housing, the rezoning?
Yeah, you know, the landing is another one as well, but those are the big ones in terms of where you get your big unit counts. Outside of that is what was displayed on the commercial corridors, Imperial, Telegraph, and Paramount. You know, the balance is if you drive down any of those corridors through Downey or any of the neighboring cities, you have kind of stretched out underperforming retail. And so how do we convert that in an appropriate way so that we get commercial nodes? So you get concentrations at your intersections where you've got the most amount of traffic, and then turn that into foot traffic as people have the ability to walk a little bit to those new uses. So the challenge is not taking anything away. So if I own that retail property, I don't want a government entity to come in and force me out. So that overlay zone is going to add an additional opportunity to reuse that site if they choose to do so, much like the medical overlay zone did, as you mentioned earlier.
Right. And just for that, is the overlay, I guess the positive is that you don't have to, we don't have to come here for rezoning on for all individual projects. It's just basically in one scope, right?
That's correct.
I have no further questions. Thank you. Okay, before we begin the public hearing, I'd like to remind members of the public participating telephonically that the city meeting rules contained in the Downey Municipal Code prohibit any conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting, even if you're participating telephonically. Each speaker should have 3 minutes to address the commission. Members of the public wishing to address the planning commission regarding the public hearing, item PLN-21-00139, only may now call our teleconference line at 562-299-6622. For those who submitted comments via email, your comments will be read into the record, and no further public comment via teleconference will be permitted. I will now open the public hearing.
Chairman Duarte, I wanted to make a suggestion. I was informed that there were some members of the public who happened to show up to the chambers for this item, and were told that we were doing everything remotely and were given the information to participate remotely. So because of the importance of this item, my recommendation is that we flash the phone number up on the screen and we take a recess to give people time to call in. Again, it's an important item, and I want to make sure that if there were folks that didn't know we were doing this remotely, that we give some reasonable time to get people to dial in and queue up on the telephone if they want to speak on this. And we flash the phone number up on the screen. And so, it just gives some time for people to participate if they want to. And being that this is the first time we're remotely performing doing our meeting, I'd like to give some time. So we could do that and take a short recess just to give people time to dial in. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Yes, we can definitely do that. If maybe Secretary Kavanaugh, if you can flash the number on the screen, and we can take maybe a 5-minute recess. If that's possible.
We're setting it up right now, Chair.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. Okay, so we'll just take a 5-minute recess and we'll log back in. Hopefully we'll have some callers and everybody will have had an opportunity to queue up so they can participate.
Okay, we're back.
Okay, so we got to be back. Secretary Kavanaugh, I'm going to have the first speaker on the phone.
Chair, there are no calls for public comment.
Secretary Kavanaugh, do we have any written public comment on the item PLN-21-00139 to be read into the record?
No written public comments, Chair.
Okay, we will now close the public hearing. We can begin deliberation. Vice Chair Owens, any thoughts?
Chair Duarte, if I may, I'm
Yes.
sorry, Chair Owens, I just wanted to insert a thought. Staff did market the change of the meeting procedures going to Zoom. We caught it in time and did so at the same time the agenda was distributed. So we were able to do that through our social media channels. The folks that were here, we did reach out to them if they have any interest in meeting with staff face-to-face or by phone or by Zoom. They have the ability to do that. We're fully accessible between now and the next time this is presented. And then also they have another opportunity to attend the city council meeting when this same item is presented, which should occur on February 8th. So I just wanted to let you know that it isn't a last chance for people to comment. We're available all throughout the work week, and they'll have another opportunity to come to a public meeting. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you, Schindler. Vice Chair Owens?
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Schindler. So with those comments, it says to me, we've got, as a city, as commission, as a council, about 3 weeks until this may hit council to give those residents that had, some concerns, wanted to comment, a window in which to do that. So I'm pleased that there's, another 3 weeks, if you will, more or less, that they can take care of that. So with that being said, I think the item's asking us to recommend approval, of what we just heard in regards to the study and the negative declaration for this. So I'm not opposed to that. It's our recommendation, or in this case, I'm not opposed personally as a recommendation to council to adopt this initial study in negative dec. Those would be my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Montoya?
Yeah, I've got no further questions or anything further to discuss with regards to this item.
Commissioner Ortiz?
I have none. We have a huge project ahead of us. 6,525 units is a lot. And I'm fairly new to this, but this is extraordinary. So I appreciate what staff did and the studies and everything. So let's move forward.
Yeah, my thoughts too. This was actually a great presentation. I really appreciated having the the materials. Yeah, I think we could and as Mr. Schindler pointed out, I'm glad that some of the residents that were there are going to have another opportunity to voice their opinions. I know this was fairly short notice on the Zoom, so hopefully there's those until February 8th. And at the February 8th meeting, they can attend and make their thoughts known. So with that, do we have a motion on the recommendation?
I'd make a motion. The motion would be to recommend approval of the initial study and negative declaration and adoption of the 2021 through 2029 City of Downey housing element as presented to us.
I second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Great. Secretary Kavanaugh, we have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Uva is abstaining. Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Commissioner Montoya?
Yes.
Vice Chair Owens?
Yes.
And Chair Duarte?
Yes.
And the motion passes with 4 in favor and 1 abstaining to recommend City Council approval for PLN 21-00139 General Plan Amendment.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. The public hearing for General Plan Amendment PLN-22-00004 is now open. I think Miss Uva, I think should be back on this one. Is she there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Glad to have you back. Okay, this is a request to recommend approval of amendment of various sections of Article 9 of the Downey Municipal Code to establish procedural and objective development standards related to the urban lot splits and the 2-unit developments in compliance with Senate Bill 9 to the City Council. Does the Secretary have proof of publication?
Yes, we do.
Deputy City Manager Schindler, can you introduce the staff person presenting this item?
Thank you, Chair Duarte. Once again, this is a second presentation to a presentation that we recently provided you on this topic at a recent meeting. To give you some background, the information is almost unchanged since that last presentation, and tonight we have our city planner, Crystal Landavazo, to provide that presentation to you.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. For your consideration tonight is a zone text amendment that would introduce new standards and regulations to address the requirements of SB 9, Senate Bill 9, which allows duplexes and urban lot splits in single-family neighborhoods. The Planning Commission was recently provided with an overview of the new requirements under SB 9, namely the ability to build 2 units on any single-family residential property, and the ability to split any property that is currently zoned as R1 into 2 new lots. The ordinance will comply with the new standards of SB 9 by amending the residential land use table to identify that duplexes and urban lot splits are permitted administratively, subject to specific development standards in all R1 zones. In compliance with SB 9, provisions to preserve existing residential housing are included in the ordinance. The proposed standards restrict demolition of existing rental properties. Similarly, the proposed ordinance allows only 1 urban lot split on a property and prohibits the same owner from splitting 2 adjacent properties. The ordinance requires all R1 development to follow existing development standards unless it would prevent the development of a second unit. In this case, a side and a rear setback would be able to be reduced to as little as 4 feet if it was found that maintaining our current side yard and rear yard requirements prevented the resident from being able to build a secondary unit. Additionally, to comply with SB 9, existing structures will be allowed to maintain all nonconformities that are existing on the property. The proposed ordinance is compliant with SB 9 by requiring 1 parking space for each unit. Additionally, developments within half mile of any high quality transit corridor is not going to be required to provide any parking on the subject site. The proposed ordinance was developed to bring the city into compliance with Senate Bill 9, as we had previously looked through the requirements of this bill. Additionally, we were looking for ways that we could allow standards that intended to preserve the character of our single-family neighborhoods while we're seeking compliance. The list before you on the right shows what the minimum requirements were from the state bill. The list on the left are the standards that the city has included into its ordinance to preserve the characteristics of our existing single-family neighborhoods. So some of those items is that we do seek to have LEED certified development for any new residential properties that are built under the SB 9 regulations. This would allow the developers to go through a set checklist that is already a prerequisite in regard to items that involve the material being used, the type of solar and other type of energy items that are going to be incorporated into the development of these structures. Tree preservation was a major item for us. The city has a very high importance on preserving and expanding the tree canopy throughout the city. Again, this is one of those major characteristics that we have built into this ordinance to make sure that we're preserving all existing mature trees that are of a certain size. And if, again, because the bill requires us to scale back our development standards in order to allow for the maintenance or the development of 2 units. If such a case were to occur, they need city approval and they need to provide substantive, and there's a minimum standard in there for what substantive tree replacement would be. Biannual inspections are going to be incorporated into this ordinance. The bill does allow us to require property owner residency at the site for the first 3 years. This ordinance will incorporate biannual inspections to try to verify that this is the case. A recordation of all disclosures is going to be required as part of all of these project reviews. Those disclosures are going to have to, again, identify the different items that trees have to be preserved on the property, that they are subject to biannual inspections from city staff and similar items. 1-story development is what is identified into the ordinance. All secondary units are required to be built at 1 story, again, unless that provision would prevent the addition of a second unit, in which case a second floor, if we do have to allow a second floor, would have to be stepped back so that it doesn't get built up to a second story at that minimum 4-foot setback. The first floor can be at a 4-foot setback. The second floor has to have an increased step back. And again, our objective design guidelines, the R1 standards that we recently went through the process of adopting, those are still in place, again, because they were designed to be objective. They're a checklist item that our residents can go through, check off, and there's no subjectivity in that process. So this essentially concludes staff's report. The ordinance was developed again to bring the city into compliance while still trying to find ways to ensure that we're encouraging the maintenance of our characteristics. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Crystal. Commissioner Ortiz, do you have any questions?
No questions, Chair. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Montoya?
No questions either. Thank you, Crystal, and thank you, Chairman.
Vice Chair Owens?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Landavazo. So these are SB9 minimums, SB9 must-haves. What's the range in regards to what we have to conform to?
We included everything that we were required to include, and we added in additional standards that we believed were important to preserve our characteristics.
So we have safeguards in place, it sounds like.
As much as the bill would allow us to, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you for your question. And I have no questions. So thank you very much, Crystal. Okay, before we begin the public hearing, I'd like to remind members of the public participating telephonically that the city meeting rules contained in the Downey Municipal Code prohibit any conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting. Even if you are participating telephonically, each speaker should have 3 minutes to address the commission. Members of the public wishing to address the planning commission regarding the public hearing for item PLN-22-0004 only may now call our teleconference line at 562-299-6622. For those who submitted comments via email, your comments will be read into the record and no further public comment via teleconference will be permitted. I will now open the public hearing and we'll start by asking the Secretary Kavanaugh, do we have the first speaker on the phone?
Chair Duarte, there are no calls for public comment.
Okay, Secretary Kavanaugh, do we have any written public comment on item PLN-22-00004 to be read into the record?
Yes, we do. Let's see. We received an email from Connie Patton, January 19th, 2022. She asked that we read this letter out loud regarding PLN 22-0004 zone text amendment, sections of Chapter 3 and Chapter 9 of Article 9 of the Municipal Code regarding urban lot splits and 2-unit projects within single-family residential R1 zones. To whom it may concern, After reading the very lengthy and detailed 33-page Downey Planning Commission agenda resolution regarding the above zone text amendment, I'm left with many unclear issues. I simply want to point them out as best I can. Please excuse the lengthy and rambling nature. The amendment is quite lengthy and detailed. There are numerous situations that are bound to come up depending on the lot being considered, especially if it's a lot with an alley as additional public access, or corner lots, or very long narrow lots when considering lot splits. When you have a corner lot, especially a large corner lot, somewhere in the 5,000 to 10,000 square foot range, it seems like there should be a lot of allowances made, especially because you have two street frontages. Things like driveway access, numerical addresses, setbacks, utilities, sewers, electrical panel, main line, and their respective locations. And I can't imagine all the things, probably hundreds of them, but certainly things that have not been addressed here in this hearing or in the amendment. It's not like you or anyone can be expected to address all of these many, many details that are not predictable or known today. And also the decisions made in this legislation could have many unintended consequences that would actually make it unreachable, unobtainable to have additional housing, even though that is the state's exact objective. The impact could haunt us for years and years to come. Considerations, things like easements running through the existing lot or even setbacks that may be being a little bit less than what it is in the legislation depending on each housing's lot, unique situations. Or what if you're just a little shy of 2,400 feet? Or what if the lot line isn't perfectly straight but needs to be jogged in order to create the lot split? Or what does access from the public right-of-way mean? Could the new lot have a driveway that allows that access so a really deep lot could be split, allowing for the intention of the state law, which is to create more housing? Or could access be the public alley, which is wide enough for emergency vehicles, but not 40 feet, as mentioned in the legislation? It just seems like there's a lot of complicated details here that I can't even... Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. We will now close the public hearing and begin deliberation. Any thoughts, Vice Chair Owens?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have all the confidence in the world that these anomalies, irregularities, one-offs will be dealt with, accordingly by our, competent planners, planning department, and city management. So I don't have a lot of concerns in regards to any particular, outstanding single issue, because I think each one, again, is single standalone and will be dealt with accordingly. So the last bit of comment would be, we've got to do this. I mean, that's just inevitable. If we don't, there are probably, ramifications yet to be uncovered or explained. So I do appreciate how hard staff works, with each challenge coming their way. And I believe as we sit as a recommendational body, we have to push this forward. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Owens. Commissioner Montoya?
I don't have too much to add, just that, there's a lot of changes coming with this, and, that makes can make people a little uneasy. But to kind of repeat what Commissioner Owens was saying, we have the people, the staff that will be able to handle this as these questions come. So, I'm happy to also move forward with this for a vote once everyone else says their comments and questions.
Commissioner Uba?
I agree with both previous commissioners, what they just said. My thoughts are exactly that. Our hands are kind of tied. It's a law that went into effect. We have to work with it. I think our city staff is doing an amazing job. I was very pleased to see some of the things that they've included in there, the tree preservation, the biannual inspections. Those are all great things, and I commend our staff for everything that they do, especially on something like this that's so new and everyone's going to struggle with it, but we'll get through it. Exactly. We have great people behind the scenes doing their jobs, and we'll get through it. That's it for me.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ortiz?
I echo everybody's sentiments. I wanted to just say thank you to Aldo and Crystal for taking time to answer some of the questions I had. I'm not a big fan of this law, but like Commissioner Uva said, our hands are tied. We have no option, and I'm just scared of the impact it is going to do to our character of our city. And but I have great faith that our staff and everybody who is working behind the scenes is going to do everything in their power to make sure Downey stays the same. I do just have one question. Maybe staff could help me out. Are you guys going to come back within 6 to 8 months, or how long, to just go over anything that you guys found from today to in a few months from now?
We can. We'll take that as a request from yourself, and if the rest of the Planning Commission doesn't object, I think that's actually a really neat idea. To see where the world is in 6 months to a year based on this. Our, how should I say, somewhat tethered example is the accessory dwelling units that we have. And so that was a big deal when it hit cities back in 2017. And as the commission has heard, when this stuff happens to cities like Downey, Lakewood, Cerritos, Whittier, La Mirada, that all kind of have similar characters, we get pulled in kicking and screaming, as we have. We've got onto a lawsuit still with the Orange County Council of Governments in regards to the RENA allocation, and we're trying to sue the state. With the ADUs, we drafted an ordinance that was extremely strict, and it wasn't until the state law changed and we got challenged and threatened with a lawsuit that we started to play ball as well, and that's all to protect our residential neighborhoods. And so this is awful similar. It feels like a dramatic change. Hopefully it'll occur incrementally on its own in terms of how the real estate market starts to kind of flesh out. Regardless, as Commissioner Owen said, there are going to be a lot of odd parcels that we're going to have to deal with. And if it comes to it, we'll be in front of the Planning Commission, as we have with other odd parcels, with a variance request for you folks to consider or not, or an appeal of an applicant because we weren't allowing for a build out or a lot split because of certain design criteria that we want them to uphold. But I do like the suggestion because we'll need to reflect as well, as we have with the ADUs, in terms of what the build out has been, what our experience has been, and what the market actually is doing as well. So yeah, we'll come back in 6 months and provide a presentation in terms of what we've experienced.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And that's all the comments I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ortiz. Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation by Commissioner Ortiz. If we can bring it back in 6 months, I don't think anybody would object to that, and take a look at what the landscape looks like at that time. With that being said, do we have a motion to recommend approval of the amendment?
I recommend to approve Amendment PLN-22-0004.
I second that motion.
We have first and second. Secretary Kamau, may you please take your roll call vote?
That should include adoption of the resolution.
Okay. Commissioner Uva?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Commissioner Montoya?
Yes.
Vice Chair Owens?
Yes.
And Chair Duarte?
Yes.
And the motion passes unanimously with all 5 in favor to approve PLN 22-0004 Municipal Code Amendment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Moving along. Now on to the non-agenda public comments. Before we begin the non-agenda public comment period, I'd like to remind members of the public participating telephonically that the city's meeting rules contained in the Downey Municipal Code prohibit any conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting, even if you're participating telephonically. Each speaker shall have 3 minutes to address the commission on issues that are within the commission's jurisdiction. Members of the public wishing to address the planning commission regarding non-agenda public comments only may now call our teleconference line at 562-299-6622. For those who submitted comments via email, your comments will be read into the record and no further public comment via teleconference will be permitted. Secretary Campbell, may I have the first speaker on the phone?
Chair Duarte, there are no calls for public comment nor correspondence.
Okay. No calls and no correspondence. We will now close the non-agenda public comment section. Moving right along to the consent calendar. We have one item on the consent calendar. So before we begin the consent calendar comment period, I would again like to remind everybody, members of the public participating telephonically, that the city's meeting rules contained in the Downey Municipal Code prohibit any conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting. Even if you are participating telephonically, each speaker shall have 3 minutes to address the commission on the consent calendar items. Members of the public wishing to address the planning commission regarding consent calendar items only may now call our teleconference line at 562-299-6622. For those who have submitted comments via email, your comments will be read into the record and no further public comment via teleconference will be permitted. Secretary Campbell, may I have the first speaker on the phone?
Chair Duarte, there are no calls for public comment nor correspondence.
Okay, great. No calls, no correspondence. We'll now close the consent calendar of public comment. We have one item on there. I don't know if the commissioners want to discuss the item or if we have a motion and a second.
I motion to pass consent calendar item October 6th.
I second that motion, but I believe Commissioner Owens has a question.
Thank you, Commissioner Montoya. Yes, I had my hand raised. I'd have to recuse myself from voting on this item as I was not in attendance for that meeting.
Okay, and I believe Commissioner Uva also was absent. I don't know. Did you get?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, great. So we have the first and second. We do have quorum. Secretary Kavanaugh, may you please take the roll call vote?
Commissioner Uva and Vice Chair Owens are abstaining. Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair, Chair Duarte
Yes.
and Commissioner Montoya.
Yes.
And the motion passes with 3 in favor and 2 abstaining to approve the items of the consent calendar.
Okay, great. Now going along, right along to other business. Does any commissioner have any other business items to address? Commissioner Uva?
I have nothing.
Commissioner Ortiz?
I have nothing. Wishing everybody and their family health during this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Montoya?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Owens?
Yes, I would echo the comment of Commissioner Ortiz. Please stay safe. A little further to go in this, and let's come all out the other end, all fingers, all toes, right?
Yes. I have just one thing to mention. I know we didn't have a meeting the first part of this month. Typically, January, we have the elections or the new speaker, the new chair for officials here. So just wanted to make sure that's on the next meeting coming up. Vice Chair Owens, I hope you're ready. So just for the other business.
I think you continue while we're still doing Zoom. You do them so well.
So that's my only other business. Just to have that on the, just remember that for the next hearing meeting. And now staff member comments. Deputy City Manager Schindler, do you have any staff comments?
Thank you, Chair Duarte. Yeah, just wanted to announce that the city's hosting another housing resource fair on January 24th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. At the Barbara J. Riley Community Center. We've been marketing the activity over our social media sites for some time now. We host these housing resource fairs on a monthly basis, and what we do is we gather all the different agencies that provide support services, other resources, and legal assistance to renters or anybody that needs that assistance in terms of that housing world. And that's all I had, Chair Duarte. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so with that, I'd like to thank everybody for not bringing up the Patriots game for Vice Chair Owens.
So the comment on that is obviously rookie quarterback. We weren't supposed to be there. What else can I say? We got there, didn't we?
He's a Bucs fan now, the Buccaneers fan now.
No, actually, no. Anybody to beat the Chiefs. Eliminate the Chiefs. Bring on the Titans. Let's go Titans.
All right. So with that, we are adjourned.